Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where Hollywood's grip on Broadway seems to only be strengthening. And the main reason for that is, I believe, that tourists like having less risk when they purchase tickets that are $100 a pop at least. If you want premium seats, they usually start at around $250, and for a big show like Hello Dolly, Bette Midler's return to the Broadway stage, they start, if you want to be anywhere near the front of the theater, $650 a piece. And people usually don't go to the theater alone, so they're purchasing 2, 4, or maybe even 6 or higher amounts of tickets. So that's a huge investment, and so again, you look for less risk. And less risk is usually a property you're familiar with. And everybody's familiar with movies. Now, Disney really spearheaded this, but the reason we're talking about it today is it was just announced they're doing a King Kong musical. So we're going to get there, but let me walk you through the evolution of Hollywood's, insidious takeover of Broadway, as far as Broadway is concerned, I'm sure. So Disney comes in and Disneyfies 42nd Street. Michael Eisner at the time, who was the CEO, was like, can I charge a fee to get onto 42nd Street? And they're like, no, it's a city street. You're just going to have to take your chances. Because, they revitalized an area which had been infamous for being riddled with prostitutes and drug dealers, etc., for decades, almost to the point where people felt that's how it should be. But Disney came in, totally changed it, basically turned it into a theme park / mall, and it was very successful for a while. But now it's kind of the pendulum effect has taken place. It went to both ends, and now it's settled in the middle, where it really is just kind of like a mall that has some stage shows on it, right? And so there's very little original theatrical content coming out. Even celebrated plays like The Producers, that was based on a Mel Brooks movie. And Hello Dolly, in fact, while it started out as a musical, is of course I think best known to people as a movie as well. That's how most people, when they walk up to decide what they want to purchase a theater ticket for, say, oh, Hello Dolly, I'm at least seen photos from that movie. I believe Barbra Streisand and Walter Matthau. But anyway, I think the only recent hits that have been original are Hamilton, of course, and Book of Mormon, which I'm surprised never made the leap to the silver screen. But anyway, now as more and more movies decide to get into the space, like for instance, Anastasia is a Broadway musical right now, the Fox animated movie. And I believe Fox even has a hand in that production. Studios besides Disney are on the Great White Way. But you're seeing a little bit more of experimentation. For instance, Harry Potter and the Cursed Child over in the UK has done very well. It's been very well received by critics, and of course it's sold a lot of tickets. And it's coming actually to Broadway, I believe at the end of this year, I think for the holiday season. But anyway, the playwright for Harry Potter and the Cursed Child, Jack Thorne, has been hired to do King Kong, which has been in development for quite some time as a musical, and Warner Brothers Theatrical, interestingly enough, was not mentioned in any of the press for King Kong moving ahead as a musical, which is interesting because Warner Brothers Theatrical is a real thing, and in fact they're behind the current Charlie and the Chocolate Factory that just opened on Broadway. I saw it. It's quite good. But anyway, they're going to do Kong with the Walking with Dinosaurs puppetry. I'm sure you remember that. That was like a really popular traveling stage show, Walking with Dinosaurs. It felt like there were dinosaurs in the arena, etc. So it's I've seen footage of it. I think it's, you're aware it's a puppet, obviously. It's not like a Hollywood special effect. But I think it'll be enough to do King Kong, especially if they do it in an artistic Julie Taymor manner. I liked Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, by the way. I thought it was very interesting, although the second half was very, very flawed. But anyway, it still doesn't mean it didn't have some good ideas. And then also they're going to go with the Beauty and the Beast angle for this King Kong musical, really playing that up, the old Fay Ray situation. And I think that sounds like a pretty good idea to me. They tried to add that a little bit with Brie Larson and Kong Skull Island, but they really backed away from that narrative. But I can see it working quite well as a Broadway show. For instance, I've been going to a lot of Broadway actually. I recently saw Sunset Boulevard with Glenn Close, which is returned to Broadway for a limited engagement. It was like an operetta. They sang like pretty much the whole thing. But I thought it was pretty interesting. The people I went with did not like it. They were like, I didn't know it was going to be all singing. But I thought it was interesting, and I thought, again, I appreciated the experimentation and what they were trying to do, and I think that at least half of the time it worked, although that's not a really good ratio when you're spending a lot of money on tickets. All right, so anyway, Kong Skull Island did make $564 million, and of course it's part of a larger cinematic universe that Warner Brothers is building right now, which includes Godzilla. So it's interesting to me that somebody could go and make a King Kong musical without Warner Brothers' involvement. That would be upsetting to me. And I think maybe, I guess, Warner Brothers has signed the best deal they could for the rights. I've told you that before. That's a very famous quote from John Michael Straczynski, when he was talking about Grant Morrison. No, I'm sorry. So many names in my... Okay, when J. Michael Straczynski was talking about Alan Moore and his Watchmen contract. This was... Grant Morrison and Alan Moore are actually very similar. But anyway, everyone was like, oh, poor Alan Moore, he's being taken advantage of. It's so horrible that DC is doing this to him. And J. Michael Straczynski very shrewdly said, you know what? You signed the best contract you can at the time that you sign it, right? And that doesn't mean when you become a bigger star years later that somehow you can go back in time and get better contracts for yourself. Those crappy contracts were a stepping stone to the star that Alan Moore eventually became. I mean, Watchmen did a lot for him. And when he first signed on, you know, obviously he didn't have as much clout as he eventually would, or he could have said, I'm not writing Watchmen unless you give me what I want in my contract. You know, obviously at the time it was a deal that Alan Moore felt he couldn't make threats like that, right? So, well, demands in the negotiation, right? So I think that Warner Brothers obviously wants to make King Kong movies, and they can't get the rights across the board to the property, which is unfortunate, and it is weird to me that they would be able to move ahead and do something without Warner Brothers' involvement. Let's hope it's not horrible, because I mean, Kong Skull Island was right on the edge, I think. I thought it was a fun movie, but it wasn't the slam dunk that they were hoping, I think. So they don't need anything pushing it into the negative space, right? Because they're not firmly in the positive. I'm curious, what do you think? How do you feel about the way Broadway has been changing as of late? Would you go and see Kong Skull Island? When you do go to Broadway, if you do go, what do you see? And do you think that these movie-based musicals are getting any better? You know, like I think Mean Girls is coming to Broadway, etc., a bunch of things. So it's not going to end anytime soon. All right, so the second story of the day, talking about evolution, is Jordan Peele. I said I was going to fit him in today, and I was able to. But Jordan Peele, you know, he not only signed with Universal and Jason Blum to make several more movies, but he's also going to be producing through his shingle. And one of the first things he's going to produce is a series for HBO with J.J. Abrams being involved. And it's called Lovecraft Country, H.P. Lovecraft, a reference to that. And it's the story of a 25-year-old Atticus Black, his friend Letitia, and Uncle George, who take a road trip across 1950s, this is their quote, their language, Jim Crow America, to find Atticus' missing father. And they deal with racist terrors of white America, again, their words, not mine, and the malevolent spirits that could be ripped from a Lovecraft paperback. I don't know if they're implying that the malevolent spirits are also coming out of 1950s Jim Crow America, or maybe they're going to deal with maybe like voodoo and stuff like that. I don't know, but it's going to be they're not clarifying yet, and it's going to be spearheaded creatively by Underground's co-creator and showrunner Misha Green, and she's going to write it and also be a producer, and probably I would guess be the showrunner. Remember I told you how much power writers have on the small screen. And Underground is the WGN America series that's currently airing. We don't know how long. That's not like a totally real network. We just talked yesterday about how Barry Jenkins is preparing an Underground Railroad show for Amazon, and that would certainly, I think, get more attention. So, but you know what? Stepping stones. I'm sure Misha Green didn't want Underground on WGN America, but they're the only ones who offered her a deal, and now she's working with Jordan Peele on HBO and J.J. Abrams. So, stepping stones. She signed the best deal she could at the time, and it allowed her to move on to the next round where she did better. But will she do better? I don't know about this. Get Out, I think this has a lot of similarities to Get Out, and I almost am concerned that a show like this would take away from the uniqueness of what Get Out accomplished. Like, is this going to become Jordan Peele's thing? Commentary on what it's like to be black in America at different time periods? I mean, I like taking ownership of those stories to black talent. I think that's very important, and it adds like a perspective that's been sorely missing from those stories and a realness. But, you know, I think that Jordan Peele's sketch work with Keegan-Michael Key was so fantastic and so dynamic and covered a whole bunch of different subject matters, not just things that had to do with race relations, although of course that was a cornerstone of their show. But still, I would hope that his career would have the same dynamics and would cover lots of different messages. I would hate for him to become the black guy in a larger white environment person. I just think that's belittling to his talent. And he said he's spoken recently about turning down Akira, and his public reasoning is, oh, I thought about it. I'm such a big fan of the original. I fear that if I made a movie about it, it would take away from the original, and maybe people wouldn't watch the original and they would just watch mine, etc., etc. He didn't want to touch it because of the casting controversy from Ghost in the Shell, I'm sure, but he doesn't want to say that because he's like, I just want this to go away. I don't want to, I have my brush with Akira, and I don't blame him. I think that's how he should handle it. Although I wish he would take it on, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, let's be honest. Not that many people are going to rent Akira. There's a language barrier and an anime barrier with people in the West not being totally into that style of entertainment. So get it a bigger audience. And I think that it would have been different for him. It would have been a different subject and message. But I'm curious how you feel about this choice for Jordan Peele next. Will you watch it? We're all going to watch it. I mean, that's a given. But also, for those of you from the African-American community and beyond, there was a big discussion about whether or not, black talent from outside of America had a right to portray African-Americans. Samuel L. Jackson said that. And Daniel Kaluuya had a really good response. He's from the UK, obviously. But I'm curious, no matter where in the world you're from, if you're part of the black community, how do you feel about Jordan Peele's career choices? And what kind of stories do you want to see him tell? All right, so speaking of someone who is sometimes not so popular with the black community, Will Smith is having a fantastic time at Cannes. He is crazy like a fox, so he's on the jury at Cannes, and he is dominating it. Like, wow, like it sucks for everybody else on that jury because they're not getting any attention. And he's crazy like a fox. He's so smart. Will Smith is a very smart guy. Sometimes he does stupid things, but he engineered his whole career. He and his team paid attention to the movies that succeeded, and they tried to figure out why, and he made a lot of really smart decisions. And he willed himself to become a major blockbuster star, and he did. He was successful. But only recently, he faltered, I think, largely because of his focus on his family, and who can totally blame him for that? I'm glad he likes his family so much and wants to see them succeed. And you know who this really sucks for? Jessica Chastain, who is on the jury with him, and I'm sure she thought she'd be getting a lot more attention rather than being woman standing next to Will Smith in photo watching his shenanigans. She's just been turned into another audience member based on how he is pulling focus. So what's he been doing? Well, he is defending Netflix as Pedro Almodovar, who is also on the jury, tries to defend the Cannes Film Festival's decision to not include Netflix films in competition going forward. And also, though, Pedro Almodovar, when everyone was like, Will Smith, at the media briefing, he was like, oh, even I would love to work with Will Smith someday. And you can see on some of because, jury members have to go to every premiere, right? So it's a great publicity opportunity for them, although I've never seen anyone get the kind of coverage that Will Smith is getting, only 2 days into the festival. It's amazing. Maybe his publicist is orchestrating the whole thing, which would be genius. So anyway, Pedro Almodovar was like, oh yes, I too would love to work with Will Smith. And I've seen photos already on the red carpet of Will Smith talking kind of sidebars to Pedro. And I'm sure he's like, I'd like to work with you too. Please hire me. And I think that's really smart of him. So he's also mugging for the cameras, dancing on the red carpet, embracing fans. Fans are along the route wanting to get signatures. And usually it's from the stars of the films that are premiering. But here a jury member is getting just as much attention. So he's actually pulling focus from the films that are premiering as well, which is crazy. It's turning it into the Will Smith Festival. And so, of course, he's there to promote Bright for Netflix, which is one of the reasons he's defending it so strongly. And also, I think for once he's by himself and he doesn't have his family with him. Again, I think it's great that he loves his family and wants to help them and see them succeed. And I think doing things behind the scenes, like producing the Karate Kid remake for his son Jaden, was a great idea. And it worked out really well. But I think when it seems like you're pushing them on too much and also saying well, if you want to see me, you have to see my kid, I think that's going too far, right? I mean, I think the best thing to do is to help them behind the scenes. And I think that his kids are doing pretty well, and I think he did do a nice job launching them. I mean, Jaden Smith got a lot of attention at the Met Gala just a week or so ago, showing up on the red carpet with an accessory of his own cut off dreadlocks, which it was very artistic. I don't know how cool it was. It was a little weird, but he certainly got a lot of attention in the press, and he trended on Twitter for a little bit. And isn't that what it's all about at the end of the day with these things? So I think Will Smith, kudos to him. Whether it's natural or engineered by his publicist, it's really impressive. All right, so those are the 3 stories of the day. Now, the viewer question, a number of you asked me to comment on this lawsuit that's going on here in the United States where somebody took a first date to see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, and she decided to text throughout the entire movie, and it really upset him. And so he went to small claims court, and he's, to file a claim for the cost of her ticket to get it back. And it's interesting because some local newspapers called her up and were like, how do you feel about this? And she hadn't even known that he'd done it. I think he was so upset about the way the date went and how disrespectful she was to him and how she actually not only was, ruined the date, but ruined his movie-going experience. And he didn't say anything that he was like, this was a way for him to get out his frustration, to go to small claims court and, a way to kind of like passive-aggressively get her back, right? Like he doesn't have to personally confront her, but, he can kind of like lob a fly into the ointment. A flointment. That's what we'll abbreviate it to. So anyway, how do I feel about it? Well, first of all, I think it's upsetting that nobody in the theater who worked there took care of the situation, because she not only ruined the movie-going experience for him, but I'm sure for everyone around her. So I don't understand why theaters continue to make it like the Wild West in there and why they don't. Alamo Drafthouse will make sure if someone's on their phone, they'll give them a warning, and then if it persists, they will kick them out. They make it very clear at the beginning of every screening that that's what they'll do with no refund. And you can very discreetly get the waiter with the call button at your seat, and that's how you can report them. So you don't have to miss the movie either, having to go get the manager and be like, and then of course, who turned you in? Oh, it's the person who left the theater. When they came back, mysteriously a manager came with them, right? Nobody wants anybody waiting for them after the show. So that's, I think, another reason that that people don't take care of it themselves. So Alamo Drafthouse is on top of this, but no other theater is, despite the threat of a shortened release window between theatrical and streaming. So I don't know why it had to get to the level of a lawsuit. And James Gunn, of course, commented on this, and that got it a lot of publicity because he said, forget getting your money back. I think she should do jail time, just making light of it. But, and also, of course, drawing attention to it in also a passive-aggressive way, to be perfectly honest with you. A lot of passive-aggressiveness with this lawsuit. But what I'm amazed by also is just how disrespectful people continue to be, not only to strangers in the theater. Like, it's just so rude that you're like, you know what? This bright light might annoy other people in the theater, but who cares? But also to someone that you're on a date with who did pay for your ticket. A lot of times these days people decide to go Dutch treat, right? And, it's not a given that your date's going to pay for your ticket. And the fact that he would do that, I thought was such a sweet, nice gesture. That for her to repay it that way is just so horrible that if I were a judge and this was like on my small claim, I would side with him, to be perfectly honest with you. I definitely would side with him. But what's really interesting to me is that she thought it was okay. Like, that she thought that it was fine. She's like, if you want to watch Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, go ahead, but I'm not that interested in it. So I'm just going to be on my phone. And I think that since this is continuing to happen and theaters aren't willing to do anything about it, and she was okay with texting during a movie, and she felt other people would be okay with it, and this has happened to so many of us at this point, I think the other takeaway here is that maybe there should be screenings where they allow texting. AMC proposed that, where there will be some screenings would be social media friendly, and it's like, oh, if you want to text while you're watching the movie, go to the 7 o'clock show. If you don't, go to the 7:30, right? And at first everybody was like, that's appalling, but maybe it's necessary. And then theaters would feel more comfortable in the non-social media screening policing that, right? Because they'd say, there's an option. You could have paid to go to the social media screening, and maybe they could charge a little bit more for the non-texting screening, right? Being like, well, we have to pay for security for that screening, and I can guarantee you that people would pay the extra ticket price to make sure that nobody was on their phone. So I think that might be the solution. Maybe we should revisit this. And so I'd be curious to what you think of the lawsuit. If you were the judge, who would you side with? And do you think that in light of this development, maybe we were too quick to dismiss social media screenings for movies, and maybe we should divide audiences? Because, hey, if some people are okay with it, who am I to judge them, right? I don't want to be in the same theater with them. If if they enjoy their movie-going experience better that way, have at it. Just keep the lights on. You guys can talk during the whole movie. It can just be a total nightmare for cinephiles, but maybe those people in that showing would have a fabulous time. All right, so that's today's morning movie news. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories, that viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered tomorrow, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.